Hi, today we're going to be talking about proof of concept activities for AV integrators and what role they play in our business. Welcome, gentlemen. Let's start with a marketing term that we see more and more. It works out of the box. If it works out of the box, what does this mean for proof of concept activities on the part of the integrator?
Let me take that first. If you keep the context as enterprise space, we identify spaces into two different categories: standard rooms and custom rooms. Standard rooms are rooms where you kind of have a plug and play based solution. The out of box just works as it stands. Custom rooms are the rooms which are intensive on integration, where you're trying to make multiple boxes work together. For the context of proof of concept in the standard rooms is more from the InfoSec point of view. An out-of-the-box solution may not work on client's network because of dependencies and the vulnerabilities it may carry when it is on the core production network of the client. So proof of concept for standard rooms is mainly from the standpoint of making sure that the hardware works well on the network. When it comes to custom rooms, that's when the discussion becomes really interesting, where we want to make sure there is a certainty about how the room is going to behave, and does it put a check against all the use cases that the client is asking for. And that's where proof of concept has a very important role.
Yeah, I do agree with, I would say, working out of the box. The product-centric manufacturers, that's a good term to use. But there's a differentiation in terms of value proposition between a manufacturer and a system integrator. Now, both are serving the client. I think the value proposition of a product manufacturer is product-centric, the product value. Whereas for a system integrator, it's more than a product value, but it's an experience value, it's a usage value. So there is an experience of emotional in terms of a system integration with the dialogue with the client. And as for product, it's just functional and operational. So the aspect of value proposition are different, but yet having it able to work out of the box, it benefits everyone. Whether you're an integrator or you're owner, and that's a good way of directing the R&D into working out of the box. Yeah.
Totally agree to the chance. Maybe to separate it, how we, as in our consulting work, often see the value of proof of concepts and this marketing phrase, everything's working out of the box. We differentiate on the one hand the user's point of view, then the product point of view, whether it's getting down to the product itself, and then the installation and operational point of view. And if you ask an operator, a systems operator or an integrator, if the products work out of the box, nobody would tell you anything is working out of the box because it's always part of an integrated system, and components have to work together. The product itself may work if you push the power button out of the box, but if you plug it together with the different systems components, maybe a different thing. From a user's perspective, it's a completely different approach, because user expects to have one push the button, for example, go to the meeting. No product will bring this out of the box. There are some ways more from the IT-centric providers in the UC world, and if you look at Microsoft, Cisco, which paved the way in this direction to bring a common user experience out of the box. So it's always important which kind of view you have, and the manufacturers often see only the product-centric view. They do their CE testings, their ROS testings, they have their electromagnetic labs, and for sure it's a high quality out in the product, but it doesn't work out of the box in the systems integrated.
Now let's look at this from the side of the end user, where their demands from technology and their demands from systems are completely changing from even 2 or 3 years ago. We're talking about automation, we're talking about location-based services, we're talking about RFID activation, we're talking about commands via voice. There are so many different things that millennials and Gen Z now just think technology is just supposed to do it. What does that mean for proof of concept activities on your end, and what role do they play in making sure that these systems can be delivered and they work in the way that users expect them to?
If you take a look back a few years when it came, we come from the corporate business, and when we built the standard conference rooms, you had a small, medium, large scale conference room. The only difference was the size of the table and number of chairs and the size of screen, etc. Very focused use case. And what you mentioned, nowadays we have completely different ways of working. I heard a study that even nowadays, out of globally, in a globally scale, out of 10 meetings, seven are online meetings or remote meetings. So a high participation of remote workers. You have different use cases, presentation, decision making, creativity, project-based work, which reflect on the rooms. And the classic AV design from the legacy is not used to these use cases. So in this case, proof of concept is always the endpoint of understanding the user requirements. It means you have to start, understand how the users work, how their business is working, then translate it into technical architecture, and then you can start with a proof of concept and validate if you're in the right way before you start deploying. So very important point there.
Yeah, I think to add on to that is it's not just a function or an operation of proof of concept, it's a principle of the workflow. I mean, as you say, validation of the system. By whose context, by the consultant's context, or by the user's context, or by a system integrator's context. So with this engagement of expectation, that's why a proof of concept is required. It's not about whether the system will work or not, it's about the system able to meet the user's requirement and within the boundary. So there, of course, there's variance, but I'm sure the variance must be in a positive side than a negative side. So as a system integrator, end of the day, we want a happy client, a happy consultant. So the proof of concept is a principle of a workflow that I would say it's good to have it there so that everyone will align the expectation and yet also adopt the direction that what the user wants. Yeah.
One of the important pieces is AV has become mission critical now. It impacts business directly. And proof of concept is extremely important when you are kind of attacking or rather using technology to enable your business. When you talk about RFID-based activation, smart buildings, improving employee experience towards the real estate they occupy, unless you kind of have a method towards arriving at a solution for that, it's never going to give you the outcomes that you're looking for. More and more companies are adopting design thinking as a process to kind of make sure that right from empathy to prototyping and testing, you kind of follow the 5 steps to basically make sure that the customer, the technology solution provider, the user, and the operations team, they're all on the same page. And as I told you, prototyping is kind of a synonym to proof of concept. And to that end, regardless of type of technology, purely because it is mission critical now, proof of concept is really required.
And you've hit the nail on the head. Prototyping, which is part of design thinking, is now such a buzzword. Yeah. But we've been doing proof of concept in AV since forever. It should be involved in every part of in every project, right? Proof of concept should be a requirement in every single project. But prototyping is so much more trendy because it's got that element of playfulness, right? It's linked with things like, agile teams, scrum leaders, just sprints to make sure that you're iterating over and over again to get the best product. How do you guys bring this new age energy into the process of proof of concept in your own businesses and in your own organizations? What can other people do to incorporate more of this methodology in their function as well?
Well, we had a design thinking workshop in our office to find out how do we get extra days, weeks in a project process to do prototyping. How do we get extra 5 days to make sure that we have enough time, part of the project schedule, to bring in the proof of concept so that we can demonstrate that to the client. And one of the key takeaways there was the fact that proof of concept as a approach need not happen at client's premises. Our partners have experience centers. We in India have a lab. The OEMs have lovely spaces where they can kind of show a solution similar to what we are trying to enable. So there are ways and means where you can bring proof of concept in a project workflow, which need not be a logistical and effort-intensive piece when you do it at client space. So there are ways and means to do it.
Yeah, we also follow design thinking methodology in an early project stage, and we have on the one hand focus more on the user requirements, and then on the technical concept which comes out. And we use tremendously. We built, I'd say 3 years ago, the Macom Lab, which is also our kind of research, testing, and experience space. It's not a showroom. It's really a living lab. It's a co-creation, co-working space. We have a team there which uses it as a workplace, but also we go, if it's logistically feasible, we go there with our customers. We say a day in the Macom Lab is like a day in the future workplace, and then you can validate the concepts in a real live environment, and you get direct feedback from the users on the one hand, but also we put in persons from IT, from facility management, which are relevant stakeholders in the rollout and in the operations, to bring the different views together, because the proof of concept has to validate a proof from all perspectives, because you have to find a common ground. That's often in the project a very difficult thing to get this common ground, and there the lab, our own lab, which was a huge investment, helps us tremendously. Second thing is when it goes more to deployments, if you have set standards, corporate standards, and you deploy it, we see with a lot of our customers, they have existing standards. It's defined, then you define the shopping carts, you define the deployment guidelines, and you procure it, you have contracts with the systems integrators, and then the standard is set, for example, for 2 or 3 years, and it's deployed. During these 2 or 3 years, a typical standard in a corporate environment for 3 or 4 room types exists of, let's say, 400 to 500 different products in different variations. It's completely weird. Every of these products has a very short life cycle. Easy example, you have a display provider, and the display goes end of life, this 55-inch display. Yeah. And the following product comes, which just number 10 after 9, and you look at the spec sheet, it's exactly the same technical specification. Then a new build project is delivered with 100 meeting rooms, and 100 of these displays are delivered by systems integrator, ordered, delivered, installed. In the meantime, the corporate IT deployed new notebooks to their employees. Unfortunately, the resolution which comes out of the video output of the notebook is not supported by the firmware of the display. So happened in practice. So, and now if you don't have a proof, it's a smaller proof of concept, but it's a kind of what we call testing and certification process. We make a system certification. Every new product which is in the standard comes into our lab, is certified, not the product itself, but in the integration in the system. And once it gets the certification, from source to the display, everything in between is working. Then it's released to the shopping cart, can be ordered and can be delivered. And so you take a lot of risk in operations for the systems integrators, for the manufacturer, and for the end customer. It's also a very important point, I think, where these technical proof of concepts, more certification processes are very useful. Yeah.
I think we all totally agree about the proof of concept is required, but all this takes time and money, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sure the consultant would desire to have it. For a system integrator, we sometimes hesitated to have it because there are a lot of time and cost implication. Ultimately, it's business risk management, system risk management, and we know that there's a system design, there's technical element, and there's also a user experience. But in between, how to gel it together? You know, different stakeholders from the IT, stakeholder from the user, it could be the C-suites, and they all have different user requirements. But technically, the system can function as such, and you will not build a system to function all three, right? You will come to a conclusion that 80-90% of the function or even operational users' needs will be attended to. And this is where I would say the definition of proof of concept is important. It's not just a statement of proof of concept, but the element of stakeholder engagement and yet also the boundary, right? Within the budget, and within the system.
But you're completely right. It takes time and money, and it's also what I think our role as consultant is to make it sensitive to the customer, to budget and to price this in, because we have some projects where we don't go in the next step before the proof of concept is done and before the customer approved it, because the risk is too high that the expectations of the different stakeholders are not fulfilled. And then the problem is who did the fault? Was it a consultant or designer? Was it an integrator? And therefore you have to price it in and you have to blend it in. That's often the mission. The pricing is not a mission critical thing. I think often it's the time because we came often too late into the process. When there's a huge construction new build project, AV is coming very late in the design phase. Everything's set, and then a high pressure is in the project, and you have to deliver. But it's very, very critical.
I'm sure that as consultants, as we are from different regions, I'm sure we definitely have a client once in our lifetime who said, "This is not what I want." This is not what I.
This is not what I asked for, and I'm not paying for.
So when
it.
the statement comes, there's no reference point.
Absolutely.
No, I think you guys hit the nail on the head, right? It's a significant investment, but the value of risk mitigation and making sure you're delivering exactly what the client wants, they know exactly what it's going to be, how it's going to work. The benefits of that outweigh any investment cost that might be expected on your own part.
It's an easy, because the value, you have to define the value. And that's a hard thing if you look in our AV environment. Everybody thinking about the initial investment, but nobody's thinking in the value or in the risk and value the risk. And you have to address this. Can't be addressed by the engineer. You also need different skills and in the company to address these points. And then you have to address it to the management of the customer, and then everybody agrees because they see if we don't spend now these 50,000 extra, we spend a loss of productivity of millions and millions only in 1 year.
In fact, one of our experiences around setting up a proof of concept was to a point where we were engaging with the IT team from client side, and we set up a proof of concept based on their inputs. And we had the actual user coming into the room, and the requirement changed to a point where we said, hey, whatever we were thinking about as possible use cases stand to be changed completely. And we had to kind of redo the entire effort of ideation, need analysis to arrive at a unique solution all over again. So it's a proof of concept not just certifies what we are going to position as a design, but it also kind of gives you buy-in from different stakeholders from client side also.
Gentlemen, it's been a lovely discussion. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.